Hello, everyone, and welcome to all of our wonderful audience members from around the world. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. We hope you are here enjoying our wonderful program on creating lasting social change, protest movements, and models from around the world. We have a really interesting panel discussion set up for you guys today, and we're very excited to get into the questions. But first, let me give a brief introduction. My name is Tim Horgan. I am the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan membership organization, and we are working to engage the people of New Hampshire, and now in this virtual space, people from around the world, in international discussions, conversations about top issues from around the world. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and therefore I will mention that all of the thoughts and opinions of the speakers today do not necessarily represent that of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire, our sponsors, supporters, members, board, staff, etc. All right, with that fun part out of the way, I want to also mention we will be taking questions throughout the event today. If you are on any of our social media pages, you are able to send us comments, questions through there, as well as if you are on our homepage, you are able to click on the little icon down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. It will pop up a chat box, and we will be able to see your question there. All right, so without further ado, I would like to bring Theo Dunphy from the Global Citizen Circle to the screen. Hi, Theo.
Hi, Tim. Okay. Well, I'll reiterate good morning and good afternoon and good evening. I'm still in morning time and having my coffee. Today, before we get started, in honor of Indigenous Peoples Day, I want to first acknowledge that I'm joining you on land which is the traditional ancestral homeland of the Wabanaki peoples, past and present. I acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and waterways and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. I'm delighted to be here and participating in this program co-hosted by the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire, because particularly because a number of years ago, I worked for the World Affairs Council of Maine. And I remember well how active the International Visitors Program was there and how much people appreciated meeting and talking with visitors coming from all over the world. So I'm really happy to be here doing this morning. Today, this discussion is with two alumni of the International Visitors Program, and they're going to focus their discussion on their own participation in attempts to create social change in their respective countries, Sweden and Bangladesh. These alumni will share their insights and perspectives on best practices around using protest to create lasting social change that is reflected in both changing public attitudes and influencing of public policy. So first, I'm going to introduce to you Tina Arend Morad. In response to Sweden's unprecedented flow of refugees and asylum seekers in 2015, Tina founded Refugees Welcome Stockholm, which meets the immediate needs of refugees and is reshaping the way civil society organizations work with the Swedish government. She's been a voice for tolerance and diversity in Swedish discourse on refugee issues and was awarded the Raoul Wallenberg Prize in 2016. Tina is passionate about sustainable social change, minorities, and women's rights. She strives to enable people to make meaningful transitions for improved quality of life by helping people to achieve their goals through consulting and mentoring civic engagers. That is wonderful, and I look forward to hearing from you, Tina, about the work that you're doing with Refugees Welcome Stockholm. I think we'll move over to Tina now. Is that right?
Yes, thank you very much for the elaborate introduction. You are correct. I was one of the co-founders in establishing the grassroots movement Refugees Welcome Stockholm from 2015 till 2017. And what started, in a very brief manner, what started as a selective measure and initiatives to fill in humanitarian response gaps turned quickly into a full-blown advocacy, campaigning, and lobbying mechanism that not only saw it as a civic duty to help other people in need, but also to shift the attitudes and perceptions of vulnerable groups that are either migrants or refugees. Now, in the first few months, we had an immense response from the public, both private as well as public sector. But that pendulum quickly shifted, or the political pendulum shifted, and with that came a long range of side effects to it. This led to us as civil society needing quickly to adapt and also to widen our base by connecting with other organizations with similar or like-minded attitudes and drives to cause change and to help promote equal rights. The European migration dilemma went from solidarity from all corners and turns into basically a politics of fear with a structural collapse that was about to happen. People in need became quickly people turning into numbers. We also saw that the activists that were once ambitious forces of good were called or relabeled as naive activists and even anarchists. What was positive became also quite radically turned into either neutral or negative. And what we saw was the need to make sure that there was not just selective measures in place, such as helping others with legal and medical as well as humanitarian needs, but also making sure that the lobbying was a big part of it and making the common attitudes and perceptions of migrants and refugees not just a number, but actually people with stories to tell. Marginalization and stereotyping was a huge challenge, and it needed continuous efforts and campaigns to counter. Civil society let me just try to, there we go. We saw a rise once the political debate and the climate became harsher. We also saw the tone online go quite cold and very fast. What was needed was not just countering with opposing narratives and efforts. We saw there was a rapid development of online hate and incitement of fear and violence that escalated quickly and went viral. And we all know that it is not hard to see negative or hateful speeches escalating and accelerating far quicker than solidarity and sympathy for others. So this was a huge area of interest in countering and working actively against. One of the things that many of us in civil society stood for was to make it part of us as a civic duty to make our society better, show others that there is empathy, there is a willingness to help and show solidarity with those who need us the most. One of the things that was important was to challenge the norms that were spread by populism and politics of fear. And those norms were maybe not always factual, more fictional, but it also needed us to be able to address them quick and fast and with an out-of-the-box thinking. Therefore, it was not just one linear of going out and demonstrating and creating petitions, but it was quite multimodal and multi-layered. So it went from going out and demonstrating all the way up to heading to petitions on the European level to lobby for equal rights and to adhere to laws that exist to protect protect refugees and migrants' rights. All of this is to create a greater tolerance in society, acceptance, as well as a better social cohesion. While we saw the other side, which was actively working in spreading disinformation and oversimplifying facts and attributes to the people who came, the newly arrived. And the stereotyping were predominantly negative, and the tone, the narrative, and the discourse became extremely brutal, where the hate speech took over feeds like in Twitter. And every time it was a campaign to make sure that the myths are replaced with facts, the narrative goes from negative to change it towards positive, and also give a face to those who they try to generalize. The acceleration of violence, such as bullying, online bullying, and intimidation tactics, both of public as well as private individuals, that was also quite crucial to make sure that it was made visible, and that there are better measures in place to protect those who raise their voice in order to show solidarity with the migrant and the refugee populations. One thing that is quite vital to understand is that it's not just hate that has a straight opposite of being love, but the actual, what would you call it, like cancer in society is actually apathy. And that I've seen not only in Sweden when I've worked with the refugee population and refugee rights, but I've also seen it in my work in Middle East, as well as in the work that came later in South Africa, where apathy is what causes fear and hate to deepen and grow. So how have we addressed these issues? And one thing is to make sure that we are, as civil society, as individuals, we are organized and also support other organizations with similar interests to stand up for others. Strategize is by making sure that we have a coordinated effort. So for instance, every time there was a demonstration by the far-right populist, we made sure that we spread the messages online, created manifestations and demonstrations where we showed that Sweden is diverse. It also stands up for love, not just hate, and counter that multiplied by more than the numbers of hateful individuals in society. Another thing that happened was also back in, I think, 2016, where we had a very well coordinated effort of lobbying for safe passages. And that was across over 130 cities from east to west, where solidarity became the key word in making sure that the political climate does not escalate into a deeper bottom than it already was. Additional ways of doing that is to make sure that using the resources available is not just covering private or public sector, but also youth. Youth are not important only today and in the future, but they are important agents of change. And we do know that the younger generation has a better perception of others rather than the 50 plus. So working actively with the young population is quite crucial in order to create a better society in the future. Some of the efforts, as you see from the grassroots level, is the love manifestation that was done by an organization for Afghani rights or Afghani refugees in Sweden. Another one was for the asylum rights. A third one was also done for showing love as a countermeasure to hate. And these manifestations and demonstrations are important because they are visible, and they also can effectively counter the online hate and the intimidation tactics that we see over and over again, because the numbers do speak for themselves in reality or in the real world, not just in the virtual world. Alternative ways where you raise awareness, and which I've been involved in, is, for instance, working with institutions, cultural bodies, as well as speaking up on giving a different story or telling stories about the others. Giving the refugees and the newly arrived and migrants a chance and a space to tell their own stories is changing the narrative from a number to an actual person with an experience to share. And that humanizes and brings back the integrity of that individual, who actually is not just a victim of war or conflict or poverty, but is a survival of all of those, with a willpower that exceeds expectations when they settle into a new country. Another way that was done is to address the young, very ambitious tech students by participating in a TED Talk talking about the perceptions and the biases, the stereotyping we have of the so-called underdeveloped world, or the North-South divide, that innovation and ambition is not limited to the European culture or the American culture, but exchange of knowledge and innovation comes from all borders of this planet. One way of also countering that is educating important, and I can't emphasize enough on it, teaching democratic principles, teaching young students and youth about democracy and liberties. It is proven to be quite vital in order to raise awareness of the inequalities that exist today. Raoul Wallenberg Academy, for instance, they have a great initiative. It's called the Q Project, where they invite schools all over the country and let them use their creative talents to demonstrate what those rights mean, each and every one of those UN rights. Other ways is going down to the European level to address and lobby for policy change, also being part of that policy creation, because you can't really determine somebody's life and talk about integration and talk about European values or Swedish values and not really have a sense of what does the other side talk about, how do they perceive the new country. So it is important to be part of the solution rather than just addressing problems. And faith-based organizations is another way that have contributed significantly into creating a stronger collaboration across the spectrum of civil society. And that is by getting together different voices, different experiences, and talking about solutions and best practices, and taking those ideas back into each respective field and organization in order to not only help support each other, but also strengthen the common cause, which is driving force towards social cohesion. One thing that I'm very grateful for, especially knowing how it is to work and live in the Middle East, as well as having a social venture in South Africa, is the lack of state support. When the government sees you as a threat, that causes more than one challenge. The government then does not work in the interest of the people, which is quite problematic. And Sweden, in that sense, has quite a number of brave and daring politicians that stand up for human rights in one way or the other. And those voices have been visible and loud. In other countries, we are not as fortunate, and know that by experience, because you don't always see the same type of civil courage. Because most politicians, or many politicians, they start their career because they burn for something. They're passionate about changing something in their society. But once you see the fear of politics kicking in, you also see that a lot of voices get silenced. So with this slide, what I'm trying to say is that we did and we do need politicians to stand up and to be daring and to stand on right side of history. So that is one thing that has helped us, but we haven't seen enough of public figures to stand up for those values. Last but not least, media and technology has been vital in my work, in all forms of work that I've done. We've seen that, for instance, WhatsApp proved to be the most effective tool in communicating with refugees, not only in Sweden, but all the way down to Middle East and Africa. We've seen also family reunification and and other issues that are related to the language barrier has been addressed through WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram. The hundreds and thousands of people that have come in contact over the past few years, they have used these platforms efficiently in order to communicate and express their frustrations, their disappointments, as well as their success. And that also has helped in many other ways for us as a organization, or for me as a person trying to gain a support for civic engagement or specific interest matters. It has been fundamental in reaching a wider audience and converting the maybe somewhat of an interest to an actual involvement, and converting or engaging with the movable middle in taking some form of a stance and support to understand or learn something new that they might not in their own little filter bubble might have seen previously. So it's not just containing yourself into the supporters, but it's also has been proven important to have opposing voices and having that dialogue. Social media pollution is one thing we are aware of, but this is where I see that the role of journalism and media comes in. Investigative journalists are very, very important to have. And we've seen that over and over again, where they fact check and they're investigating and find whoever is trying to spread this information about the migration issue in Europe. These journalists, despite all the fears and the intimidation, they still continue doing their work. And that's what we need, better protection for them and also better support. Last but not least, with the media and technology, we've seen the pros and the cons in more than one way, which I'm not going to address all of them, but one thing that is quite important and needs to be taken into consideration, being anonymous online is tightly linked to instigating greater or deeper hate and bullying. But what we don't see enough of is the actual real live dialogue. And that's one thing that many of us continue pushing for, that these dialogues need to be face-to-face, not just online, because it doesn't really add any value to any debate or any question. And I think that should be enough for me here.
Thank you, Tina. Are we going to do questions now, or shall we?
Yeah, so we do have Khalid up next. So he's here in the room and ready to go. So if you want to give his little intro, we'll be all set.
Excellent. Well, I'm really delighted to introduce to you Khalid Hussein, who is the founder and chief executive of the Council of Minorities. Khalid is a human rights attorney and a minority rights activist. He belongs to the Bihari Urdu linguistic minority, a formerly stateless community in Bangladesh. The Bangladeshi court system positively responded to a writ of petitions submitted by Khalid and fellow activists in 2003, ending the Bihari status of statelessness and making the Bihari citizens of Bangladesh. After this, Khalid began implementing a project in conjunction with the US-based social enterprise Namati, or Innovations in Legal Empowerment, to provide legal advice and advocacy and human and civil rights awareness training to the Bihari Urdu language community in Bangladesh. Since 2011, Khalid has organized annual national minority and indigenous youth leadership summits in Bangladesh. So welcome, Khalid. Look forward to hearing what you have to share with us.
Khalid, you're all set to go. Khalid, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. All right.
Yeah,
Whenever you're ready.
sorry for my PPT. Yeah. Thank you.
So it looks like we're having some trouble with Khalid's connection. I know it's been a bit spotty today. So why don't we go ahead and try and bring him back on here in a second. All right, Khalid, you want to give it another go?
Yeah.
Looks like we're still having trouble with Khalid's connection. So maybe what we'll do is we'll bring Theo and Tina back on board. We'll have Khalid maybe sign back in, and we can go into a bit of a Q&A. And once we get Khalid back in, we'll bring him back up for his presentation.
Great. Okay, Tina, there's a few questions that came in the chat, and the first one that I thought was interesting, and I think it would be interesting to hear if from your perspective in Sweden. I'll just ask this question that was posted. How do we ensure that peaceful protest for social change remains peaceful and separate from any outside groups that may incite violence and hate? Now, that's something that, you know, we've seen here in the United States, problems with that. And I'm curious what your experience is in Sweden.
Well, we did have a recent incident where there was a provocation from neo-Nazi groups rooted in Denmark, and this was just a few days ago, where the Islamic and the Jewish community, or the imam and the rabbi from that province, addressed it in a very, very good way. And for me, this was impressive, because you need to make a distance, or distance yourself from violence. Although the core aim is to provoke an aggressive response from, for instance, the Muslim population in Malmö, which was the place of incident, the response from the religious groups was nonviolent. They came out to try to calm the youth. It didn't really, unfortunately, fully succeed. Some of them were a bit violent and burning and whatnot, protesting, but that is not representative of the religious communities, because the religious leaders condemned any form of counter or reaction, a violent reaction. And we saw that in Stockholm shortly after that, where the same far-right group or extremist groups in Stockholm tried to instigate the same type of response by provoking violence and showcasing the so-called violent tendencies of young boys with a different ethnic background. So they made their way into a suburb that there is no real reason for them to provoke, but it happened. In this case, the young associations that are working with youth in that area took some great initiatives and making sure that the response is non-violent and also non-reactive. And I think that they are doing a great job, because the representatives of these civil society, or CBOs, they are the ones who lead their way. The youth also leads the way by showing that they are above it. So no, I don't really see how. I mean, I think as a society we are quite non-violent, at least according to my perspective. And I think we do handle things in a very positive way. So we had, for instance, a few years ago, we had the neo-Nazi group that came to protect the women during the refugee crisis, as they called it, because the rapists and the criminals are the outsiders. But we are the women, and we represent the Swedish society. So they were not protecting us. They were coming to intimidate us. And at the same time, we could see that those within our organization stood by and just basically let them pass. No reaction, and showing love instead of hate is always better.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I hope that answered the question a bit somehow.
No, that was excellent. Thank you.
All right, we've got Khalid back, so we're going to try him one more time. So let's bring him on screen. And Khalid, whenever you're ready.
Hi, Bruni.
Khalid, can you hear us?
Hello.
Oh, there we go. I think we've got you now.
Yeah, are you hearing me? The sound is clear.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello. Okay, perfect. Should I go?
Please, yes. All right, looks like we're still having some trouble with Khalid. So we'll bring Theo and Tina back to continue our conversation. And hopefully we can get a stronger connection for Khalid and get this figured out. Thanks for sticking with us.
Thank you, Tim. Tina, you mentioned the youth that you have great hope in, that we all have great hope in leading us forward. And I wonder if you could say a few words about what your organization, how have you engaged young people in the work that you're doing in Sweden and other places?
Well, as I'm no longer with the Refugees Welcome movement, I did continue working with the Raoul Wallenberg Academy after being awarded, obviously. And I can't really say enough of how many initiatives they do working with the young population. So seeing what initiatives are being made, basically teaching them about empathy, teaching them about strengthening empathy as a muscle, getting them involved creatively in learning, not just by reading about the UN Charter. For me as a person, as an individual, going out to the schools and talking with young students. I even had an incident where I was requested to go up to the northern part of the country where there was a high school or gymnasium, what we call it, where the students were taught to be very anti-immigration. And so it was a tough assignment, and that's not the first time you meet young people who are influenced, whether it's negatively or positively. But you need to give them a chance of seeing the world with new eyes and getting to hear the stories of the people, not just by pictures and news. So we know that by reading news, it's not always going to add any value to a young person's picture of reality. But to engage with other people, to engage with people who have come and fled war and seeing the stories of that person and getting to understand, maybe not walk in that person's shoe, but at least get a sense, a face and an identity of that person that they are so scared of. I remember at that instance, it was mainly about the young unaccompanied minors that have arrived to Sweden. We had a substantial amount of people who came, or young people who came. And there was a fear factor from the young students that, well, they're dangerous and they are, they had many negative attributes added to those people who had arrived from Afghanistan. And so the young students didn't really know the stories behind them, but I've had the opportunity of working for a home during that spectrum of time. So you get to learn more about these young folks, and you get to hear their stories and their experiences. So it was very easy for me to try to transfer and translate and give them a visualization of a reality that might not be as what they had expected, but it's a reality that is unfair because it's a lottery. They got born there and these guys got born over there. So it is nothing more than that. So trying to teach them about sympathy and empathy is something that is doable, but it takes time and repetition, and that's something that is worth investing in.
Yes, and you're speaking to my heart, Tina. The organization that I run, Global Citizen Circle, we really brings people together from all different parts of the world to share stories so that you have this sense of common shared humanity and how important that is for building trust and empathy. So you're definitely speaking to me with what you're saying.
All right. Sorry to jump in again. Great conversation, and I hate breaking it up, but we've got Khalid back one more time. We'll give it one more shot. See if we can get him going. Here we go. All right, Khalid. Whenever you are ready, go ahead.
Hi. Sorry, I'm really sorry for my internet connection. Hi, everybody. Good morning and good evening from Bangladesh. My name is Khalid Hussain. I am Chief Executive of Council of Management.
All right. Looks like we were so close. Sorry, Khalid. I'm not sure that we'll be able to get this figured out. But why don't we continue our conversation with Tina? Really sorry. I'm not sure if we can get a better connection for Khalid, but we'll go ahead and move back into our panel discussion.
Okay, well, I'm sorry too that we aren't able to hear from Khalid. These are one of the many times that technology isn't serving us, but often it is. So I'm so grateful for being able to meet with people from around the world, but sometimes that internet connection just isn't what it needs to be. So we'll go back to speaking with Tina. And there's a question here in the chat that I think, because you've worked with different organizations and different groups in the Middle East and in South Africa, which I'd like to hear more about. But first, maybe you can comment on this question. Can groups across the world help each other to support social change movements and share best practices? I mean, I think the answer is probably obviously yes, but how so?
Absolutely. I mean, I think again, like when you see something negative spreading as a viral cancer, the same can be applied. Don't misunderstand me correctly now. The same thing can be applied for positive change. One thing that we saw, for instance, is that in the very, very first months, my mind was blown seeing the individuals from different stages in life, from different sectors that you would never imagine would be passionate about showing compassion and humanity towards others. I mean, there were people doing initiatives, being part of initiatives that I would have never expected. That's my own bias. So you also saw that this type of phenomena started spreading, not only within a certain city, but it spread first around the countries, around the country in itself. We also saw similar phenomena happening in all over the Baltic route. You know, when people left from Syria or Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran, you saw that same route. The coordination was happening in real time every single day, where whoever you know, you would refer. Whoever you need support from, you would ask. You throw a fishnet, and then there's always a multitude of favors coming back. So I strongly believe that collaboration and inter-organizational support is vital. Nobody can do it by themselves, but if bad things or negative, if negative things can happen, so can positive things change. So there is no other way, and we are social beings. When you see something and it makes your heart and fuzzy inside, it leads to others wanting to jump. And as I think I said it once when I had a high school class to inform on how to be part of being civically engaged. So some of them asked, well, it's such a big move. I can't be a humanitarian activist. And I said, no, you don't need to do that. You just need to do one thing. That is either maybe posting, a line, or you can just go and donate something. You don't need to be actively involved in the beginning. You can be passively involved. And then slowly, if you think this is good for you, then you just continue. And usually it is like a bit of a good dose of well-being. So people tend to be wanting to be part of something that is meaningful.
Yes, absolutely.
Contagious.
All right. Sorry to butt in one last time, but it looks like Khalid has changed devices. So give him one more shot at this. Hopefully third time's the charm. And then if not, we'll just stick with our conversation. So Khalid, let's see if we can get.
Yeah, I have changed my machine. Maybe let's try. Are you listening me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So very quick. It's my bad luck, I can't go through with the PowerPoint. So very quick. Good morning and good evening from Bangladesh. My name is Khalid Hussain. I'm Chief Executive Council of Minorities, and I belong to Bihari Urdu-speaking linguistic minority and formally stateless community of Bangladesh. Why the Biharis are called as a stateless, formal stateless community? Because in 1947, when India and Pakistan was divided into Pakistan and India, the Biharis from different state of India, they migrated to East Pakistan, now is in Bangladesh, and they call as the Urdu speaking Mohajir and refugee from India. So during the period of Pakistan, the Bihari were privileged community because of their language and culture. So they belong to the Urdu language, and they Muslim. They belong to the majority people. But in the 24 years of period of Pakistani government and Pakistani politicians, they started agitation with the Bengali community in this area. So after 24 years of Pakistan era, the Bengali community started protest to separation of the country. So during that time, a section of Urdu speaking community, they opposed the creation of Pakistan because they believe on the Islamic State, and they migrated from India just because in the name of Muslim and Islam, and they believe that Pakistan will be the umbrella of Islam, so we will be very safe in Pakistan. And again, in after 20 years, 24 years, Pakistan is going to be broken. So a section of Urdu speaking community, they oppose the creation of Pakistan. So that time during the war and after the war, the Bengalis started killing of the Biharis, and they looted their properties, and they lost their jobs and business, all those things. Then in 1971, 16 December, finally Bangladesh has emerged as an independent country, and Bihari become an enemy of the country. So that time ICRC, International Community for Red Cross, they came and they built 116 refugee camps all over in Bangladesh, and they put it, all the Biharis inside the camp. So since 1972 to still, the Biharis are living in the refugee like camps. There is no any uh, uh, basic facilities for the Biharis, and in till 2003, the Bihari were treated as a stateless community. So in 2001, including me and my some friend, we filed a writ petition in High Court in 2001, and we claim ourselves we are by born Bangladeshi citizen. We are living in Geneva camp, and Geneva camp is in the territory of Bangladesh. So our name is missing in the voter list. Just after 1 year, the High Court said this 10 petitioner from Geneva camp, they are by born Bangladeshi citizen, and their name should be included in the voter list. So first time in 2003, 5th May 2003, the High Court declared this 10 petitioner from Geneva camp, they are by born Bangladeshi citizen, and their name should be included in the voter list. So there were some mistake from us to petition with the petition, because we claim ourselves just 10 people, not we say we all the Biharis, those are living in 116 camps, they are Bangladeshi citizens. So according to the court instruction to the election commission enrolled our name as a 10 petitioner from camp, we are a Bangladeshi citizen. But the other, like 116 camps, and we have a population of 400,000 Biharis. So we missed just silly mistake with this petition. So in 2008, again, another group from Mirpur camp, they filed another writ petition in High Court, and they say we all Biharis, those are living in 116 camps, we are Bangladeshi citizen, and we want to include our name in the voter list. So again, the court said this Biharis, those are living in 116 camps, they are Bangladeshi citizen, and their name should be included in the voter list, and they are Urdu speaking Bangladeshi. So first time we received our nomenclature as an Urdu speaking Bangladeshi. So it was 38 years or 40 years after we receive our citizenship, so we realized we don't have any documentations. Then again we started to work on the documentation issues, and in 2013, with the support of Namati, a US based NGO, we started a community paralegal program, and we trained like 14 paralegals all over in Bangladesh and inside the camp. The paralegals are doing outreach within the camp, and they are disseminating the message of 2008 court judgment, because this is very important to the community people to know they are Bangladeshi citizen according to the court judgment. Because their life story is very long, living without citizenship. There is no any documentation. When the Urdu speaking community go through the government office and they claim anything, any paper, then the government official says, no, you are Bihari, you are living in the camp, so you are stranded Pakistanis, you are non-local, so you are not able to get any identity document like passport, birth certificates, and so and so. So when we started the paralegal program, paralegal started motivating to the community people, mobilizing and empower them regarding 2008 judgment and importance of the civil documentation. So now within 5 years, we have achieved 17,000 civil documentations issued, including this the birth certificate, death certificate, trade license, passport, national identity card, opening the bank account, health support, disabled support, and old age stipend. The first time the Urdu speaking received this type of support through the paralegal program. But within this, in 2016, some of Urdu speaking community they apply for the passport, and their passport has been rejected. When the paralegal started discussion with the investigation officer, and investigation officer said clearly, you are living, your client is living in the camp, and camp is not a permanent solution, so you don't have any electricity bill or any gas bill, water bill, or you don't have any property agreement, so the Biharis are not able to get the passport. And even he added, the Biharis and Rohingyas are not able to get the passport. Then we talked with the SB officers, special branch officer, and we said, why you are mixing with the Biharis and the Rohingya? Rohingyas are refugee, Biharis are Bangladeshi citizens, they have the national ID card. They said, we have a written instruction from the Home Ministry. Then after 1 month, we challenged to the Home Ministry, and we filed a petition under Right to Information Act, and we asked to the Home Ministry, we are Bihari Urdu speaking linguistic minority, and we have national identity card. Our name is including in the voter list. We are Bangladeshi citizens. So do you have any policy to provide the passport to the camp dwellers? Then just after 1 month, the Home Ministry provided a 6 pages written order from the Home Ministry, and they straight written, those have national ID card and they are living in the camp, they are Bihari, they are able to get the passport. So after that document, we again challenge our passport. So after that, our some camp dwellers, they received the passport with this order. So these are very challenging issues with the Biharis. We have the court judgment, two court judgments, strong court judgment, but still people are living in the camp, and every day they have to face discrimination from the government officials and the government schools, universities, and college. Sometimes because of their address, because the Biharis are living in the camp, and they don't have any other permanent address or any other space to live there. So those are living in the camp, they are facing this type of problem. So we started this program. This is very unique program, a paralegal program. At least some people are getting the civil documentation issues, civil documentation support, because in Bangladesh the school has been announced, without any birth certificate, no any single kids can enroll their name in the school. So this is very important for the Biharis kids. If you don't have the birth certificate, you can't get admission in the school. So during November and December, the paralegals were very busy to make this type of birth certificates to get the admission in the school. So why? How many days, how many years we have to go through with this projects. Sometime this project will be end. So we started some workshop program like sustainability program, and we started created some pro bono youth from the camp. So now we have 200 pro bono youth from all over Bangladesh, and we have almost 200 women pro bono workers. Those are supporting to the paralegal program. So within our workshop, we try to learn them about the civil documentation issue. How can you apply for the birth certificate and passport and national ID card, and where from you have to go, how much fee you have to pay. So now this pro bono workers, this pro bono youth are working with the paralegals, and they are trying to support to their community. So within this, after long time, the Biharis received their citizenship issues from the High Court. This is really prestigious for this community. But in 2016, in February, the Bangladesh cabinet has approved a draft citizenship bill, and this bill is very contradictory bill. If this bill will be enacted from the parliament, so again the Biharis and some war criminal families, they will be stateless, because in the bill there is a section 3, 4, and 28 is said this bill will be the supersede bill within the other any judgment, citizenship related judgment, degree, or any other document. So our citizenship has come through from the court through the judgment. So if this bill will be enacted from the parliament, then again the Bihari will be stateless. So we have started some advocacy program, and we organized some workshop, and we try to invite some civil society organization, and the intellectuals and the researchers, and we think about, and we say this bill is really harmful for us. So before going to the parliament, it should be review the bill. And so we have organized some radio program and the press conference. So after that, we have drafted a recommendation on the bill, and we have submitted to the Home Ministry, to the Law Ministry, and the Law Commission. So we got a written letter from the Law Commission, and they appreciated our recommendation, and they said this is really wonderful recommendation. We are trying to review the bill before going to the parliament. So we are still very confused about this bill. If anytime this bill can go through with the parliament, and if it will be enacted, then again the 400,000 of Urdu speaking community, those are living in 116 camps, they will be stateless again. So even we have started international level advocacy. We have submitted UPR last in 2018, and we have focused on the issue of the draft citizenship bill. I have visited the UN Minority Forum, and I have raised the issue in UN. This is really risk for the statelessness. The globally UNHCR is trying to end of the statelessness in the globally, but in Bangladesh, this bill is trying to create the statelessness within this country. So these are really very harmful things for the Biharis. Still, we are trying to mobilize to the government to somehow to review the bill before going to the parliament. And then we have another annual National Minority Youth Leadership Summit. The Council of Minority organized a youth leadership summit, and we invite all the minority youth from all over Bangladesh. It is 3 days residential training in Dhaka, and we try to bring all the minorities like religious, linguistic, ethnic minority, and indigenous community, and we try to learn them about the leadership, community activism, and the personal development. Because we believe if we raise our voice individually as a Bihari, we are facing so many discrimination in Bangladesh. We don't have any basic rights or anything. No one is going to listen me. So this is the good way to organize all the minorities community, and we raise our voice collectively. So now we have almost 400 youth from different minority community. We have a group of minority youth in our chat box, uh, in our list and alumni. So sometime we all together, we are starting raising voice for each other. Like if anything with the religious minority, then all the minorities said about this. If anything with the linguistic minority, then all the minorities say together. Thank you. If you have any question, sorry, I have a very good presentation, so there is so many pictures and all those things about the camps issues. So it's my bad luck, I couldn't show you.
Well, thank you, Khalid. It was great I'm glad that we got to hear from you at any rate. And there is a question here for you, Khalid, that I would ask that's in the chat. It said, you mentioned using the courts to get changes made. How can other movements work within their government systems to make change?
Make change about the citizenship draft bill.
Change in general, where areas where you think change needs to be made. How can movements use the government and the court systems to make change? It sounds like your movement has certainly used it.
Regarding the Biharis in Bangladesh, you can see there is so many minorities in Bangladesh, like ethnic minorities, indigenous, and the religious. So Biharis are one of the worst minority in Bangladesh because they are anti-roll in 1971. So everybody hate the Biharis because they all thought they are the war criminal. They oppose the creation of Bangladesh. So even the media, if you organize anything regarding the Biharis, any advocacy or anything, media is very less interested to publish our news. So now we are thinking only the advocacy is the way to raise the Bihari's issues in the in the parliament, in the government, in the different department and the media. And I believe media advocacy is one of the most important element to raise the issues of the Bihari, because medias are very neglected with the Bihari issue. So I think mobilizing the mainstream society is important. CSO is important because you have to come through and you have to raise the voice of the Biharis. You can see there is so many NGOs, but you didn't find, you can't find any national level big NGOs are working in the camp. They say no, we have so many population in the slum, and they are the Bengalis, they are the nationalists. So why we are going to be in the camp? Because they are different ethnic, they speak Urdu. Whatever we are Muslim, we belong the same religion of the majority. But in Bangladesh, the people prefer nationalism and culture. So they belong on the Bengalis. So we are not Bengalis, we are a different ethnic group. So we are neglected in every way. So we are trying to mobilize the local government officials. We have started a series of advocacy. Last year we received a small grant from IRI, International Republican Institute. So through with these projects, we have a several of meeting. We organize the media advocacy. We are going to organize the next month, and we have organized different advocacy meeting with the government, CSO, and the community. So IRI is working with us to raise the voice of the Biharis in Bangladesh.
Great, excellent. I have a question for both of you that has come into the chat here. And I'd like you both to comment on this. What examples of social movements in other countries have inspired you? Are there any specific examples of strategies from other countries that you want to adopt? Tina,
I've been speaking a lot, so I'll let you go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, I think social movement. I can go through with some example, like in India, they use the Facebook and the WhatsApp, and they started education in the Delhi regarding the citizenship NRC, regarding the NRC. So this type of really, the national level protest is really important to change the social issues and social changes. So in future, we have a plan to organize from all over Bangladesh, the youth from all over Bangladesh, the Biharis, and we will include our summit minority youth, and we will try to make a national platform to raise the voice of the minorities. Is not just for the Biharis. We will select something like from the different minorities. What is the the burning issues of the other minorities, like the religious, ethnic, and indigenous, and the Biharis. So in future, we have a plan, like in 2021, we will try to organize a national platform and national agitation in Bangladesh to raise our voice for the.
Great. I can't tell if you're still speaking, Khalid, because we've kind of lost you at the very end there.
My word is cutting, right? So
Okay.
so yeah. So we are trying in next year to organize a national platform with the other minorities like religious, ethnic, and indigenous minority, along with the Biharis. So we all together we will select and identify some burning issues of the minorities, and then we will go through with the national agitation, with the national platform to raise voice collectively.
Wonderful. Great. Tina,
Yeah.
you have done work in South Africa, in different areas of the Middle East. Are there movements that you've seen in those places or other places in the world that have inspired you in the work that you do now or want to do?
Well, there are two things. One of them has to do with the use of symbols in nationalist propaganda. So that's one thing when you reclaim the meaning of a word from a controversial negative word. So for instance, we've had in previous cases where you actually re-own or reclaim that word. What does it mean to be Swedish? When do you get to be Swedish? So if I eat meatballs and if I wear if I wear the folk suit, the traditional clothing, if I dance around the midsommarkransen, is that enough? Is that going to make me Swedish enough for you? So these are the controversial questions you ask, because the entire point of departure for the far right populism or the far wing extremists, they come up with they're not like us, they are different, etc., etc. So me, as a former refugee, settled 35 plus years in Sweden, if I'm outside Sweden, I'm Swedish. If I'm inside Sweden, I am Swedish, but I must have something else because I look a bit exotic or different. So then we celebrate the National Day. So you reclaim those symbolic days and the flag and show your pride in being part of that society. So they don't own that question per se. So what is the source of strength for specific extremist nationalist propaganda becomes the same thing for the multiculturalist propaganda. So you kind of steal their wind in one way or the other. Another thing that has to do with capacity building, which is my other strong side, and that's what I love doing, is working with programs and engaging with different economic growth initiatives. And that's one thing that, for instance, was the part of the work in South Africa or in Cape Town. And that is to remove the gender bias in economic or capacity building. Skills development and vocational training. So you always see, I did some work in the West Bank with a Swedish agency for peace and peacekeeping. And some of the projects that you see there are actually, because as a gender expert, you get to see the stereotypical work. The women cook, they learn, to open a salon, etc. So you kind of twist it around, and you have a woman who learns to be a mechanic engineer, or a woman who learns to drive a truck, a woman who gets to learn how to create watches from mechanical, from specific type of engineering. These are the professions that are not very typical for female, for the female population, because it is assumed by development agencies, etc., that, well, that's what the women like to do. Well, on the other hand, you haven't asked them if they know what to do besides these typical, normative type of capacity building initiatives. So I think it's very interesting that you get to see these ideas from other organizations and other movements where they actively work on fighting gender biases in the work sector or the workforce. And you see that also in a very vulnerable or a conflict-ridden situation where they don't really have the capacity or the access to that type of sector, and you make that available to them. And then you see miracles and magic happen. So that's a bit like idealist, but it's a painful magic that happens.
Yes. Excellent. I have another question for both of you. And this is, again, one that was posted here. And it is, what impact has the pandemic had on the particular social changes you'd like to see happen in your countries. What have been the challenges? Have there been unexpected benefits?
Regarding the COVID-19 impact within the my community, so it is really worse because the Urdu speaking, the camp dwellers are engaged in the informal sector. So during the lockdown, they just completely, they don't have any access to go out for the work. So it was really disaster for this community.
Mm.
And everywhere, in Bangladesh, there were 3 months the lockdown, and there is no any scope to work. Even my project was hampered, like the paralegal program was stuck just 3 months, and we didn't do anything because the Biharis are living in the camp situation, and camp is very crowded, and so many people, like in Geneva camp. Geneva camp is one of the largest camp, and there are 30,000 people are living in very small place. So these places are very high risk for the COVID-19. So no one is trying to moving inside the camp, and no one is has the access to go out the camp for the work. So our project has completely stopped during that time, and even still we have very less activities within the camp because the paralegals are from the camp, and they are really afraid about the pandemic and the issue of the COVID-19. So these are the problems still we are facing.
Thank you, Khalid. Khalid, can I just follow that up? Does anybody in the camp, do they have access to the internet?
Yeah, inside the camp we have the access of internet because they are using the Wi-Fi. The one family, they hire the antenna, and then they share all the camp people, all the neighbors.
Okay.
That's the one router, and the 10 family they are sharing because now education is going to be in the flow. Some of Urdu speaking, those are living in US, especially the engineers and doctors. The Biharis engineers are living in US, so the diaspora is very very strong for the Biharis. So American Biharis are supporting to their fellow Bihari in Bangladesh. So we are providing almost 400 scholarship inside the camps for
Mm,
the higher education. So people are just receiving the scholarship, and they are going to the college and universities. So now the education is going to be a good ratio.
good. Great. Great. Tina, would you like to comment on that, on how the pandemic has impacted your country or the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I was very unfortunate because I was operating in Cape Town at the time when shortly before that happened. And I would try to be positive, but we had a very unfortunate chain of events. For instance, the high corruption in South Africa was one detrimental cause of a downward spiral. Another one was the weak governance. Public service delivery was not working. In addition to that, we're trying an uphill battle, creating an academy in order to create more jobs. And that was a program in order to avoid or kind of like to supplement the gaps that exist in the workforce, or the lack of education or the lack of access to education. So our ambition was quite high, and it was 2 years, roughly 2 years in progress, where the platform was ready. But then the last nail in the coffin was COVID-19. It hit South Africa quite late. But it hit very hard with a total lockdown. So there was no way. It was an economic downturn. In addition to that, a full, almost military lockdown. And then added to that, a state that was not able to handle its corruption or its finances. So it was more than too challenging. And I made it out just shortly after before the closure. And since then, I've been working, I'm always simultaneously working between the two different worlds, the one in Scandinavia or in Sweden, and the one that is in Africa. And it is very challenging because the borders closed down. So you can't really do much more than being confined to your online space. And the online space, we saw there was a downturn because the negative voices, the opposing voices were, I would say, a bit puzzled about this whole pandemic. So for one span of time, it was a bit quiet, But then the conspiracy theories started booming and, really rupturing into a full-blown. So there was no complaints per se for a short period of time. But again, you see that when you try to work across borders, or you try to work with initiatives that needs physical face-to-face interaction, it made it extremely difficult. I would say the economic or the credit crunch crisis in 2009 is not even comparable to this period when it comes to being actively involved in the community.
Yeah, it is such a difficult time for so many people around the world, and I guess we're lucky that we have access to the internet, but it really can't take the place of the face-to-face in so many situations and settings. So I appreciate both of your perspectives on that. I have another question that has come in. You both went through the International Visitor Program, Leadership Program. And can you tell us a little bit about how this program has helped you in your work?
For me, I visited last year, so all the memories is really very fresh for me. And it was really interesting for me, and I found most thing is similar. Like when we visited Philadelphia, so we visited interfaith organization. So I found really interesting their work, how they are dealing with the minorities, and I have learned one thing from that organization, like Philadelphia. They organize the Religious Leaders Council. So that was really inspired me a lot, because we organized the Minority Youth Leadership Summit. So it was quite similar, like Religious Youth Council. So we when I just come back, and then I just discuss with my team, and they all agree this is really important to talk about with the religious people from the Muslims, Hindu, Buddhist, Christians. So these people have the power to disseminate the peace and message to their community. So we have planned. So next year we are going to organize the same thing, like Religious Leaders Council in Bangladesh. So we will invite all the minorities leaders and religious leaders. And the other thing we found in the different state, like commissions, minority commissions. So this is also important for us. We don't have any minority commission in Bangladesh, so we started working with here in Bangladesh to establish a minority commission. So all the minorities people, if they face anything, so they can go through with the commission, and that will be the easy process, because the minorities everywhere, minorities are neglected. So if we will be able to establish this, that would be really a wonderful thing for the Bangladeshi minority commission. So these two things is like carry over from my IVLP journey, and we are trying to start working on this issue.
That's great.
Yeah. Beside being an unforgettable trip and really once in a lifetime, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who thought so from my group. It kind of opened your eyes and seeing integration efforts, the role of civil society in the US. It gave a different sense, because I think I was a bit sensitive to, initially, I was a bit sensitive to the externalizing social services to civil society initially. And then I saw how it worked, and the role that faith-based organizations had in helping newly or resettled families get into society in a better way. We also saw certain groups, certain ethnic groups, more integrated than I had seen, for instance, in one way or the other previous years being in Sweden. So it had a lot of goods. It also had less good sides, but it kind of gave you a perspective that there are some things that you can take with you and kind of like work with it and learn. And one of the things was to see the role of the state as well as civil society in it. That kind of initially made me a bit skeptical, but I think at the end of the trip, I think I have softened up somewhat. And beside that, it was a great experience to have a great group. We were 13 with very diverse backgrounds, from civil society to government, and primarily from MFAs, or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it was really good, because usually an activist is seen in one light, and that is a person who is there to force some change, whether good or bad. And it can be intimidating in one way or the other. But at the end of the day, when you're sitting with someone that has, who's sitting on the other side of the fence, you are the state and you are civil society, it kind of it creates a lot of bridges where you have more in common than you have differences, and both want to work towards the common good. So it gave invaluable friendships and contacts. And I've even, made my way to Croatia to help my fellow IVLP alumni addressing refugee women from Middle East because of the language and the religious background. So it was an honor to actually be able to be there and help out. So it has added a lot of value. And beside that, you're friends for life. So
that's right. That's right. Well, that sounds great. What both of you are doing, it sounds like you have used the connections that you've made and the different movements that you've been active in, and to great effect, and in terms of moving positive social change in your countries. Are there any, I'm going to ask this question because we often ask this question of discussion leaders when we do programs ourselves, and because we do like people to share their stories, because that really does make a difference when you know what a person's story is. And I'd like to ask you both to say something about what was perhaps the biggest challenge that you've faced in your activism, and how have you overcome it? Or have you overcome it? How did you get through? I mean, we all get to a point sometimes when we're working really hard on a cause or something that we feel strongly about, and we get to a point where we say, oh, this is insurmountable. I can't go on. I can't do this anymore. And then we find a way to do it and to continue on. So have either of you had that experience, and how have you yourselves gotten beyond sort of that difficult moment?
Can I go first? Yeah.
Yes.
So for us, like as I mentioned earlier, the Biharis are very sensitive minorities in Bangladesh. So we are very targeted all the time. So during the activism within the community, so it is quite difficult for me and like other those are the community activists, like the Bihari activists. So we all are in target group because we are living in the camp, and camp is a slum. So all the power agency, the police and the special branch officers, they all the targeted to the camp. And even we have to go through the NGO bureau affairs for any project. If we receive any foreign donation, we have to go through with the NGO bureau, and we have to submit all the papers, what kind of project this and how we will operate, and how we go with this. So each and every time we have to face problem in NGO bureau. Then NGO bureau send these documents to special branch officers, to the home ministry, to DGFI, and all the time we have to face so many questions with these police officers. So what kind of activities you are doing inside the camp? Is it like the Islamic anything, or the terrorism anything? Why you are doing the passport for the Biharis? Are the Bihari will going out from the Bangladesh, and they are going to do any anti-social activities? So this type of harassment we have to face all the time. But we started trying to talk with the civil societies. Those are intellectual in Bangladesh and the researchers, and we try to get their sympathy. So we have a bunch of the Bengali speaking people. Those are really renowned person. So we have go through with them, and they make some recommendation against us. No, these are really doing such a good job. They have the good program. You can go through with this. and they are doing the civil documentations issue. They are going to do the leadership issue. So this type of some intellectual support is very important to come over from
Mhm.
this type of problem. Otherwise, it is quite difficult. Even I always targeted with this agencies group, what I am doing, why I am frequently visiting in the foreign country, what kind of conspiracy I am doing against this country, and so and so. So the Bengali intellectuals are really supportive group for the Biharis. Some
That's
people
great.
are a group of people they are supporting. Yeah.
Right, right. Thank you. That's really interesting, and obviously, everybody when they get stuck and feeling, overwhelmed, having that support from others is so important. So appreciate that answer, Khalid. Tina, how about you?
There are a number of issues, but I think one of them that is an overarching one is the fact that when I see that we are electing more and more people to run states and governments and municipalities on all levels, where while we are preaching and teaching empathy, sympathy, and tolerance and respect for human rights, then I'm reading more and more news where EU member states, one after the other, is having like a wave of very undemocratic public officials, and they gain traction. It's very hard for me to digest and try to explain to a younger generation that being good is rewarding. It's for your future. When I see my present that elected figures or public officials are not very nice, they are not very tolerant, and they are gaining traction. They are making an impact, even if it's a negative one. So it's kind of like you're trying to showcase for future generations and younger generations that you should be a good citizen. But then we have people leading that country who might not be very good citizens, and they are the ones leading that state. So it's very hard to stomach, and it's a very precarious time we're living in, where everything can change in a blink of an eye. So it's exhaustive, and sometimes you lose hope, even if it's for a minute. Then you read about something that's happening, and it happens in some village or in a town very far away, and then you kind of like think, well, if they can do it, I can also push it a bit further.
Right, right. So important to hear and listen and see what others are doing to give us hope. And it's that hope, I think, that spurs action towards positive change. So I don't see any more questions, and I think we're coming up on close to the end of this session. And I want to thank both you, Khalid and Tina, for joining us today. It's really been a great pleasure to talk with both of you and to hear about just the incredible work that you both do in helping to make this a better world. I'd like to invite both of you and anybody who is watching this to join Global Citizen Circle. Our next program has a lot to do with some of the themes here that you've spoken about in terms of othering, looking at people as the other. And our next program is on the 23rd of this month, October, and it's about healing divisions and finding the common humanity in all of us. And so we're looking forward to having a good conversation about that during the month of global dignity, and look forward to seeing you then, and hope that you can join us. So thanks so much, and appreciate your being here, and good luck with everything that you're doing, and let's stay connected.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you to Theo, to Tina, and to Khalid for joining us here today. Also, I want to thank the United States Department of State, the Office of International Visitors, the International Visitor Leadership Program, Graduate School USA, and everyone who helped to make this program possible today. We really appreciate it. And for our shameless plug, our next event for the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire is on October 14th, this Wednesday. We will be talking about climate change risks and the U.S. military with Secretary Ray Mabus, Jeff Goodell from Rolling Stones, and Andrea McClellan, a city councilor in Norfolk, Virginia. Thank you all for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed our program, and we will see you soon. Bye.